when I was in college, I made a decision to get into the film business because I had this kind of artistic bent, as well as an interest in things, in mechanical things and how things worked.
I think to, photograph these hyper-dramatic moments and to be in that world of that is very exciting to me.
The power of men and women working in concert on a great idea or great story with wonderful actors is truly life-changing. It's not just a 3 or 4 month experience or 6 months. It really opens your whole life up.
I get the most satisfaction from the crew, and I find every crew is different and they become a different animal collective as a crew. And when I'm not shooting, the thing I miss most is other people.
What don't I love about what I do, I think, is the answer to that question.
I love that I love the job and it doesn't seem like work.
It just adds so much spice to your life, or to mine certainly, that I always couldn't wait to get to work every day.
Every day is different. Every project is different.
The challenge of doing this every day and having something different to do every day is the best possible way I could think of spending my life. So we had to create a test that was going to be exactly the same for each camera. The first thing we did was to light a set that had some really hard challenges for cameras in it. We created a huge dynamic range. We had a window that was really, really bright. We chose a translight that had a white house. And we brought a person into a very kind of shaded, low-key area with practicals, walking through almost silhouetted areas and coming to rest in really nice facial soft light. So we had a huge range of challenges and ways to perceive a camera in the shot that we designed. And then apart from the master shot, we had 2 punch-ins that we did. And we shot where the window filled much more of the frame. We had another shot that was a much darker part of the room. We had specially lit up this very smooth wall with a graduated light that very smoothly graduated from a bright to almost to a black. And this was an opportunity to see how the cameras handle that graduation, because a lot of cameras have pretty bad banding, which are like little strips, they're like little rainbows. That was another test that we devised. Now, with the empirical takes that we did, the lighting remained constant for all cameras, and I color corrected all those to be exactly the same, or as close as I could possibly make them in the baseline. If a camera was not able to record the full dynamic range, I would not lift the black so it became noisy, which might not be a choice that everyone normally would make, but that's what we did for this test.
Ce qui m'a effectivement sauté aux yeux, c'est globalement les caméras, les tests ont été projetés dans l'ordre de prix croissant et quelque part on a l'impression que la hiérarchie est respectée en termes d'image.
I think it's the budget determines often the camera, you know, and what your subject you're shooting. All those cameras can shoot acceptable pictures, but they're going to be better at different things, and people are going to grade them better.
I thought the Alexa held the blacks beautifully. You know, the definition in there, that latitude, held quite strongly.
Also Arri Alexa, also ich habe mit der auch schon öfter gearbeitet, finde das vom Handling auch sehr angenehm und es ist einfach toll, was Arri dort anbietet, auch technisch.
It's the plumber, not the wrench. It's the guy who's using the tool more than the tool that he's using.
The places that I noticed the biggest difference was the lamp. When you boomed down, there was chatter on the earlier ones and it kind of vanished as you went through it. And also the banding on the wall really disappeared about halfway through.
I'm surprised with the Canon C300. A little bit disappointed in the way it handled the darks, but the Alexa and the F65, obviously they're great low light cameras, and they brought out really great details in the darks, and they're able to hold the detail also in the overexposure by the windows.
Technology is, I think, proving a bit detrimental because everyone's focused on what camera they can shoot on, what's the best camera they can afford. How are we going to get that camera rather than looking at the image and looking at the lighting and trying to create the best shot?
I always wander into museums and wonder, why is a painting great?
Classic paintings, of course, are a source for inspiration for lighting.
You can look at painted pictures, you can look at still photographs.
You just try and figure it out yourself and go, I wonder how they did that. The way that it captured, that was just beautiful.
That whole process of self-discovery really feeds back later.
Learning to have a vocabulary about light is a very important part of lighting itself.
You learn the value of light, the intensity, the relationship of light to dark.
One source of light coming through a window, coming through, out of a fireplace.
That whole process works back to the work, big or small, that I do as a cinematographer.
I think most of what we do is trying to recreate natural lighting and shape it so that it tells our stories dramatically.
Just figuring out, how can I make this scene or this mood or this interview even be something that connects with the audience.
On every shot, my eye kept going to the overexposed parts, the large picture window, and then when she opened up the door. And I think that's where the more expensive cameras really shone through.
It starts on the window and there's the woman on the right with the striped shirt that has the light coming from the window. And her shot is where I saw the cameras either holding detail or just falling apart really fast. I mean, those are very telling.
I don't think the 7D, because I just think it falls apart in the window scenes.
I thought the F3 was very interesting in the way it held highlights, which is what I thought was the distinguishing factor for me. And as a colorist myself, highlights plays the biggest part to me, because that's where data cannot be recovered.
I wouldn't have had a problem using any of them on anything that I do at all. But the differences are subtle. There's differences in latitude. You could see that some of the cameras weren't holding the darks so well, and in particular the outside shot looking out of the windows, very telling. You could see the dynamic range increasing, and the cameras with the higher dynamic range, or what I believe to be higher dynamic range, you could see them holding on to the detail in the highlights much better.
Amongst the rest of the camera, I think Ray Epic is the other one that I like for what it can give you out of the box. Yeah, and I think for its price range compared to the Alexa, if for a lot of independent filmmaker, I think Epic is a good choice.
Particularly with the woman in the black and white skirt, and against that wall, how the lesser cameras, particularly like the 7D and the iPhone and GH2, the black got really muddy really fast on that. When you got to the upper levels, you were very definitely seeing the color in that wall. That wall was a really, really deep, rich burgundy, and the Alexa, the F65 specifically, held that color all the way through the shadow in that shot. And I thought that was really impressive.
If there's no good story and it's not well told, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is or how high resolution it is. No one wants to watch it.
The story is the most important thing. The quality of the image and the camera that you shot it on is definitely secondary.
Some may have better resolution than others, some may have more dynamic range, but they'll all tell the story, providing you put the light in the right place, you cast well, the actors perform well, and you have a good story.
I've seen so many shorts that maybe don't even look the best. You know, they've been shot on a PD-150 or, an iPhone. And what it really comes down to is, can you touch somebody? Can you touch somebody? Can those characters, can they reach through the medium into the living room or the cell phone or wherever they're watching it and make somebody think?
Let everything else disappear. Don't get hung up on the spec sheets. Don't get hung up on all that. Care about the story and care about your craft.
Filmmaking technique is advanced. We have better technology, but the actual key components of filmmaking really have not changed at all.
People have always told stories. What and how we all learn, how we all teach each other is through narratives.
Story is a sequence of dramatic events conveying an emotional truth.
Style is bullshit. Style without content. Style that amplifies content is a different thing, but films that doesn't look good, it's bullshit. They have nothing of enduring value. It's just like eating candy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But don't pretend it's more than it is.
Storytelling moves me when it works, I get emotionally involved and I weep in the cinema, I'm not ashamed of that. It's part of being alive, to be affected by somebody's thoughts about what they believe and what's important to them, and to emotionally move you to tears is it's a great talent to have that.
from cheapest to most expensive, the banding seemed to decrease.
The way the F3, held the gradation and the highlights, particularly in that rear practical lamp on the desk. It was a little video-y sharp in the overall picture, but the highlights, looked really nice in that.
You can use any camera, and if you light it correctly, you're going to get a great scene. If you light it incorrectly, you're not.
Als je goed op de muur lette, zag je echt heel duidelijk dat vanaf de F3 en de C300 was ook nog goed, maar de F65 die sprong daar echt gewoon heel duidelijk uit.
The ARRI and the Sony F65 for that, though fabulous with the low light, especially in the corner as by the sort of buffet there, as people were coming from the door into the low light. Obviously those were far and away better than some of the others.
Yeah. I don't think that, we're at a point yet where just like, oh, any camera's great as long as you light it well or whatever. There's still some, and I realize we're dealing with a huge, a $300 camera phone all the way up to, several $100,000, but there are still limiting factors there.
Well, a good life is doing what you want to do and being compensated enough for it so that you can have a personal life beyond your work.
A good life is one that you're happy.
Being able to spend my life doing something I really loved, cinematography.
It's certainly the life that I've been living.
I want to work till I drop, of course.
I don't know. As long as I don't get exhausted and, I'm able to stand and all that, as long as I can.
I love what I do so much that I can't imagine being alive without doing it.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, I told you I'm 9 years old, and I'm 90 years old, right? So where I see myself in 5 years, have you ever been on an Irish funeral at a wake? It's great. The body is out there. You all walk around, you drink, and everyone laughs and gets drunk, and there you are. So I would actually, I could see myself like that, yeah.
What if you're still alive? What's then at 5 years?
Oh my life. I like to be making documentaries, keeping in touch, learning. That's the thing about documentary. Documentary is not getting what you want. It's wanting what you get. Every documentary I go on, I learn. And I think in that learning, it makes you a better communicator.
You know, usually when you're creative, it's just about where you can get your rhythm going. They're so close, and then you make up the difference with what you're using, you know.
You know, the empirical round, I was really impressed with the F3. That was the first one that came up that seemed to handle everything, that had detail outside and inside, and you know, had some decent range to it.
My first three cameras when we did the empirical were the F3, the Alexa, and the F65. But after the creative, the Alexa dropped down to fourth, and the Red Epic replaced it.
It really is about, you know, the art and the tools, and it's here. It's here. It's not a piece of hardware. It's never been a piece of hardware.
Et oui, c'est très intéressant qu'avec les Alexa, c'est presque pas beaucoup de différence. Et c'est intéressant de voir parce que ça, comme ça, on comprend que beaucoup des cinématographes, il aime beaucoup l'Alexa parce que ouais, c'est pas beaucoup de choses.
In the real world, you're not necessarily going to be comparing one versus another, but if the story is compelling and the acting is good, I think that's going to hold people.
You know, the dogfight, obviously, amongst this group of cameras is the mid-range, you know, $10,000, $20,000 cameras, where they're really very close together, and you know, what you're fighting over is workflow and ergonomics.
It's extraordinary what you can get with a camera these days. And my mother is a photographer, and she always said, it's not the camera, it's the person behind the camera. So I think you can use any one of these and get something quite extraordinary.
My takeaway on this test is that, you know, a lot of these cameras are good enough to do what you need them to do to make a movie.
The whole challenge of this project was making sure that these cameras could match up, and I saw that they could.
It was interesting to see the limits of what you can do with light, and that they're all pretty similar.
And despite the various extraordinary price points, you know, between $150,000 and $500, there certainly was a tremendous similarity in palette.
It's the great thing we're kind of being given right now, which is the affordability of making movies.
But the technology's not the focal point of what we're talking about here. It's about the creativity.
My takeaway is probably that it really comes down to the operator and it comes down to the crew.
You need to take the tools, you know, and your knowledge and your artistic vision into the digital world and make it something new, something different. It's not film, but, you know, still make it your own.
Every artist has basically the same color palette available. But Hopper does a certain thing with his color palette, and Joe Bloggs does another thing, which is successful. It's like equipment. Everyone, in a sense, can rent the same gear, but who does it? Whose work can be magical and whose work is mundane?
The takeaway is the educational factor of learning to light from actual DP.
I think you never give up learning, so to be on a set and be allowed to watch other people work, it's always a surprise how they change things and how they deal with light, because the possibilities are truly infinite.
Of course, I need the equipment to achieve what I get in my head, but getting it in my head is the most important thing.
You know, I think a young filmmaker, they don't have to buy the greatest and latest and most expensive camera. You know, the camera that they have, if they get to know what that camera needs in terms of lighting, and they do that, and they learn and they hone their craft, that camera's going to be good enough for them to make a movie and tell a good story.
you.